Hi everyone, BritSimon here. So I'm just doing the usual waiting game for the visa bulletin, which is published each month. And it occurred to me that for a lot of new people, newbies, they may not understand what the visa bulletin is, how to read it, and how it affects the DV lottery process. So I thought I'd just do a quick video for you just to educate you a little bit about that, and I thought that might be useful. So you'll often hear people in the DV community talking about the next VB. They're talking about the visa bulletin. The visa bulletin is found on the government website here. Let me just show you the government website. And right now, today, we have already last month seen the May visa bulletin published last month, and the next visa bulletin will be the June visa bulletin. First thing to know about the visa bulletin is the government's got this very confusing naming convention. So it is currently May. They're about to publish the June visa bulletin, and that visa bulletin will include information about which cases can be interviewed in the month of July. So I don't know why they did that, but they did. It seems like a daft naming convention to me, but there it is. So if we right now today, we're waiting for the next visa bulletin. First thing to know about visa bulletins is that they are published almost entirely consistently between the 8th of the month and the 15th of the month, every month, right? Every month, without fail, I have people who ask me, when is the visa bulletin being published? And they'll ask me on the 5th of the month, when is the visa bulletin? Why is it late? And, it's the same thing all the time. So let me tell you this. The visa bulletin is published between the 8th of the month and the 15th of the month, and it's published every month. They don't take time off for Christmas. It's every month, and it's between the 8th and the 15th. Now, there have been a few times where it's been published outside of those dates, but those dates are normally the dates. Okay, so just get that into your head first thing, right? Then, if you want to come to see the visa bulletin, you can go into this site here, which explains, which has the visa bulletin, and on that site it has all of the historical visa bulletins from previous months, if you want to see those, and even previous years. Okay, you can go and do that. But the currently active visa bulletin will be shown there, and then the upcoming visa bulletin is always appears in this place, right? So and you'll see for a period of a few days just before the visa bulletin is published, you'll see this coming soon message. Okay, so if we look at the last visa bulletin, let me just show you that. Now, the visa bulletin isn't only about the DV lottery. It covers various information for different visa types. So the first sections are about the family-sponsored sections, and it gives various dates, which are dates concerning different categories, not DV bulletin, DV lottery. Okay, so you can ignore most of that stuff unless you have an interest in it. And just scroll down to the section that covers the diversity immigrant DV category. Okay, and in there you'll see this is the May visa bulletin that was published in April. Okay, so in there it has the old numbers, right, which is for the month of May, and then it has the next numbers for the month of June. Okay, and again, this is one that we're looking at, the old one. All right, and we're about to see the new one. I'm sure this is going to confuse a bunch of folks that are in DV25, but anyway, I'll deal with that. And basically, what you'll see if you compare the 2 months, you'll see that there is a change in numbers. Africa was 35,000 for the month of May interviews, and for June interviews, it was 42,500. Then you'll see that Asia went from 6,500 to 8,250, right? And what essentially that means is that if your case number is an Africa case number, you look at the Africa region number, and you also look to the right where it says accept. I'll explain that in a moment. But if your case number is under the number that is shown on the visa bulletin, then that is your number becoming current. We talk about your number being current. And so it is case numbers under that. Now, for Africa in the month of May, if your number happened to be DV25 AF 35,000 exactly, your number is not under 35,000, therefore you weren't current. But in the next month, your number did become current. But the point is that it's numbers under the number that is shown there, okay? As you can see, the numbers are regional. They're generally by region, but there are these except countries over here. And what this is a slightly different number that is applied to people from or chargeable from that country, Algeria, Egypt, and Morocco, in the case of Africa last month. I'll explain why that is in a moment. But essentially, if you are chargeable to those countries, no matter where you're being interviewed, then your number is only current when the accept number is above your number. Okay. Now, the reason for the accept numbers is, generally speaking, where they have a high number of selectees in a specific country, where most of those selectees will go to an embassy, a specific embassy. What that means is that those, if they allowed all of the people from that country to process at the same rate as the rest of the region, it would flood or overwhelm that particular embassy. And so they spread out the work a little bit over the 12 months. It also generally indicates countries which have been limited in the draw, meaning most of their entries are selected in the lower number ranges. Okay, and there's a whole reason for that, and I've explained that. It's not as unfair as it sounds. In fact, if it is unfair, it's unfair only to those countries that are limited. But nevertheless, this is what, from a visa bulletin point of view, this is what you need to know. Okay, so if you happen to be chargeable to Morocco, whether you're interviewing in Morocco or interviewing somewhere else, such as Paris or London or anywhere else, if you're chargeable to Morocco in this month, which was the month of May, Africa was current up to 30,000, and Morocco current up to, Africa was 35,000, Morocco up to 30,000, for example. And then in the next month, you can see that Africa increased to 42,500, but Morocco was kept at 30,000. So this is another thing that you have to know. Sometimes there is a repeat of the number. You can see that for Oceania, for example, in the month of May, the number did not increase between May and June for Oceania, right? And only increased by 50 numbers for South America. So sometimes we talk about whether there's going to be a big jump or a small jump in the numbers, or no jump at all. There can actually be no jump whatsoever. It is also technically possible for numbers to be reduced. Very, very rare that happens in DV lottery, but it has happened. There was one particular year where the number was reduced down to a limited number in the final visa bulletin, and had been higher, actually had been current in the previous couple of visa bulletins. So it is possible that it can go down as well as up, but that's very rare. Okay. So you'll get the idea of looking at this, and you'll get to learn about the VB. And for a lot of people, this becomes an obsession. They wait for the VB, and they are desperately keen to find out when they could be interviewed. But they have to wait for their number to be current compared to the visa bulletin. Now, being current means that you're eligible for an interview. It does not guarantee that you will get an interview in that month. Okay, your ability to get interviewed in a month depends on 3 factors. Number 1, you have to be current. That means your number has to be less than the visa bulletin shows, either for the region or for the country, if there's an accept for your country. Number 2, your DS-260 must be processed. And in the early months of the lottery process, let's say in October, November, December, there will be quite a lot of people who are current, but their DS-260 won't be processed because it took longer to process their DS-260. That will happen. That'll be a delay for some people. And all that means is that that person is going to be interviewed at a later month when their DS-260 is processed. Okay. The third factor that affects your ability to be interviewed is the condition or the performance of your embassy. In some embassies, they do very well. They keep up with the amount of work they're given on a month-to-month basis, and no backlog of cases exists. In other embassies, some of the busier embassies, they tend to build up a backlog, meaning the capacity of the embassy is lower than the number of people that need to be interviewed at that embassy in that new month. Okay, so maybe the embassy says we've got space capacity to see 100 cases, but there's 200 cases that are suddenly wanting to be interviewed in that month. What that means is they'll take the first 100 cases based on a number order system, and the next 100 cases would be the first cases that they would consider in the following month before they add more cases to the queue of people in the following month. And so it creates a backlog situation, which in some embassies can be very dramatic and actually can be the downfall of some cases. Okay, so 3 factors to remember: is the capacity at the embassy, is your DS-260 processed, and is your number current? Okay, if those 3 things are true, then you will be interviewed, and that's obviously critical. So that's about it. I think that probably explains the visa bulletin pretty well. Remember that the timeline for the visa bulletin is predictive. It's released, between the 8th and the 15th of the month, and then interviews for that time period. So the visa bulletin that is going to be released, I would imagine, in the next few days, will be for, it's May, right? So it's going to be the June visa bulletin, which will be for July interviews. It'll be released between the 8th and the 15th of May, and then almost immediately after the visa bulletin is released, interviews will be scheduled and sent out in the second notification letter. That's to people who are eligible for an interview and have all the other factors that I mentioned, the DS-260 and the embassy capacity. And so that will be for July. In other words, you get the time period between May, let's say, and you get all of June, and your interview will be ready in July. It'll be scheduled for July. That gives you 6 to 8 weeks roughly in order to prepare for your interview. And it's during that period when you gather your documents, perform your medical, and so on. Okay. So hopefully that's given you a better idea about the visa bulletin. One last point. Because of the timing of the visa bulletins, the final visa bulletin that affects DV 2025 will be published in July. It'll be called the August visa bulletin, and it will control interviews for September. Okay, and that will be published between the 8th and the 15th of July. Without missing a beat, they'll then continue to the August publication of a visa bulletin, and that visa bulletin will be the first visa bulletin that affects DV 2026. So all the visa bulletins that you see between now and August, if you're DV 26 candidate, they don't mean anything to you. It's only controlling DV 2025. Okay, so then in August, we will see the September visa bulletin being published, which will affect interviews in October. And so cases being interviewed in October will have to have capacity at the embassy, DS-260 processed, and be under the numbers that we see for the beginning of the year in the visa bulletin published in August. Okay, I hope that's all making sense. It's a bit of a confusing mystery there with the naming convention, but apart from that, it's a pretty consistent system. Okay, if you have any questions on this topic or anything else, please feel free to ask me questions, preferably at BritSimonSays.com. Please do subscribe to my channel, particularly if you're a new DV26 winner. You need information like this to understand how the whole process works. People come up with their own ideas, amazing ideas sometimes. And, this is a relatively simple process, but it confuses many. And so I'm here to try and explain the small details that will give you a better understanding. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. Bye bye now.